The old man felt a chill, not the kind that meant a draft, but the kind that whispered of endings. He looked up, expecting the Grim Reaper. What he got was different. The Reaper stood, tall and skeletal, but his bony finger tapped impatiently on a wrist where a watch should be. "Right then," he slurred. "You the, chap due for the dirt nap?" The old man blinked. Are you all right?" he asked, peering at the Reaper's swaying form. The Reaper hiccuped, a puff of spectral smoke escaping his shadowed mouth. "Peachy," he mumbled, fumbling in his cloak. "Just need the, paperwork." He pulled out a scroll, only to have it unroll with a life of its own, stretching across the room like an unruly serpent. "Bit of a do at the office," the Reaper explained, struggling to rewind the scroll. "Retirement party. Bob's moving on up, you know? Big cheese, Bob. Throne of skulls, the lot." He hiccuped again. "Don't tell him I said that." The old man, thoroughly bewildered, found himself strangely unafraid. He'd expected dignity, solemnity. This was just sad and a little bit funny. "All right then," the Reaper announced, brandishing the scroll like a battle flag. "Name's, He squinted at the parchment. "Bartleby? Bumbershoot?" He looked up sheepish. "Don't tell me, I'll get it." The old man sighed. This was going to be a long night. "It's Harold," he said patiently. "Harold Jenkins." The Reaper snapped his fingers, which promptly popped off his skeletal hand. "Jenkins!" he exclaimed, scrambling to retrieve the errant bone. Knew it was something like that. He shoved the finger back on, wiggling it with a grimace. "Right, Harold Jenkins, time to shuffle off. This mortal—" He trailed off, swaying precariously. "Coil?" Harold offered helpfully. The Reaper blinked at him. "Coil," he repeated, confused. "Why coil? We're not making a—" He paused, a look of dawning horror crossing his skeletal features. Oh no, not again. He clutched his head, moaning. Not the karaoke bar. Anything but the karaoke bar. Harold, now more amused than concerned, patted the Reaper's bony shoulder. "Rough night?" he asked sympathetically. The Reaper groaned. "You have no idea, Harold," he mumbled into his bony hand. "Retirement parties at the office are bad enough, but when the boss's new secretary is a succubus with a thing for tequila," he shuddered. "Let's just say I'm never drinking firewater again." He straightened up, suddenly remembering his duties. "Right, Harold," he said, trying to regain his composure. "Time to go." He held out his hand, but instead of a skeletal hand, he found himself staring at a rubber chicken. "Where did that—" He started, bewildered. Harold chuckled. "You're a mess, you know that?" he said, shaking his head. The Reaper looked at the rubber chicken, then back at Harold, his skeletal face a picture of utter dejection. "I'm the embodiment of death," he moaned, "and I can't even hold a scythe straight, let alone remember how to use my powers." Harold, feeling strangely sorry for the personification of death, put a comforting hand on the Reaper's bony shoulder. "Tell you what," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "How about I make us some coffee and we wait for this to wear off?" The Reaper, head in his hands, looked up at Harold with bleary, hollow eyes. "You know," he groaned, "for an entity signifying the end, I sure make a mess of things." Harold, handing him a steaming mug, chuckled. "We all have our off days," he said kindly. "Even death needs a break sometimes." He glanced at the clock. "Besides," he added, "it's 4:58 a.m. Paperwork says 5 p.m. Plenty of time to sober up." The Reaper took a long sip, the spectral essence of the coffee seemingly doing wonders for his spectral hangover. He looked at Harold, a slow grin spreading across his skeletal face. "You know, Harold," he said, "you're all right for a—" He stopped, realizing his faux pas. Harold just laughed. "For a dead man," he finished, winking. "Don't worry about it, I've been called worse." He sat back, enjoying his own coffee. "So," he asked, "what's it like being the Grim Reaper?" The Reaper, feeling more himself now that the firewater fog was clearing, leaned back and smiled. "It's not all doom and gloom, you know," he said, launching into tales of his more interesting encounters. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, they sat there, two unlikely companions sharing stories and laughter. It was perhaps the strangest dawn either of them had ever experienced. And strangely, it wasn't all that bad.